Hello Animorphs fans and welcome back to the Animorphs Reviews YouTube channel. Today we're doing another AniLysis by Fluffs and it's on the Bat Morph. This creature here, this is the brown bat. Why did the Animorphs use the brown bat morph? Well, it all started in book 10. Let's have a look at the quote. We need that Pemalite crystal, but the Urks have created a maze of defences like nothing you can imagine. That crystal is in a room at the heart of the Matcon building. There are Hork-Bajir everywhere. Elite Hork-Bajir warriors, the best. And the crystal itself is guarded by an ingenious system. It is concealed in a room of absolute darkness. Absolute darkness. The slightest, faintest light, ultraviolet, infrared, any light, will set off alarms. Within the darkness are wires that are set off by the slightest touch. So to get to the crystal, you'd have to be able to find it without seeing it. And avoid the wires that are also invisible in the dark, I said. So that is Eric introducing the concept of, or talking about the Pemalite crystal and doing his best Donald Trump impression. The defence is the best you've ever known, the Hork-Bajir are the best, the best Hork-Bajir. It's true, isn't it? Shaking her head over there. These defences are like nothing you can imagine, the best Hork-Bajir, just the best. So yeah, Eric tells them about this building, the Matcon building, which has the Pemalite crystal. Of course, the Pemalite crystal allows the Chi to become a bit more dangerous in the grand scheme of things. And the Animorphs want to get it. And in order to get it, they have to go to the Matcon building where there's this room in total darkness and there are wires everywhere. So this is where Cassie comes up with an ingenious solution. The bat. Cassie walked down to the far end of the barn and came back carrying a small cage. Total darkness, can't touch walls, floor or ceiling, and you have to travel through a room strung with sensitive wires that you can't even see. She held up a cage. Meet the animal that can do all that. It was no larger than a small rat with its leathery wings folded back. Cool, I said. First I'm Spider-Man, now I get to be Batman. Of course, at this point of the series, Tobias hasn't got his morphing power back yet. He gets that 3 books down the line. So initially, the 5 other Animorphs are the first to acquire the Batmorph, but Tobias does eventually get the Batmorph himself, so all the Animorphs have the Batmorph. This is the quote from book 17, where Tobias realises he's going to get the Batmorph. We should demorph, Cassie said. Why? Tobias asked. So we can really enjoy the lovely ambience? I was thinking since we're in a bat cave, maybe we should go into our own Batmorphs, Cassie said. Oh, I don't have a Batmorph, Tobias said. Easily fixed in here, Cassie said with a laugh. I'll bet there are a few 100,000 bats hanging from the roof of this cave, just hanging around and waiting for someone to come along and acquire their DNA. In book 10, we're not told specifically what species of bat it is, but that does happen later down the line in book 21, where Jake mentions the following. I focused my mind on the bat. The bat DNA had come from a common brown bat. Not a very big animal. More like a mouse with wings. Apologies, it was actually from the underground. I'm getting ahead of myself here. So we find out from book 17 that it is the common brown bat. And when I looked on Google, I typed in common brown bat and all the results were actually little brown bat. That's what it came up with. So I'm assuming it's the same species, because else why would it do that? But that's where this picture came from. This little chap here. Quite cute and cuddly looking. Until, of course, you get the wings. Well, yes, my dear?
Sky puppies.
Sky puppies. Sky puppies that drink your blood.
No, my dear, no.
No?
Cringe.
That's cringe as well now, is it?
Yes.
Is there anything I do that isn't cringe?
No.
Supposed to be on my side.
I love you.
Say something good about me.
I like your face. Nice.
What, this face?
Yes, that's the one.
Well, I like your face too. In fact, it's the only reason I married you.
That was...
Oh yeah, that too. You know, it's funny because they can't see. That you missed out on that, audience. She pointed at her personality. That's what she pointed at. Anyway, right, so yeah, they've all got the Batmorph now. We know that it's the common brown bat. Or at least the first 5 are. Tobias may be different species, but that's never clarified. So there's that. And what's my next note on? I've got a little note in here of Marco in book 10, pondering about the fact that they could potentially practice the Batmorph. But of course, because this is Animorphs and things don't tend to go as planned, they never practiced it until the first time they morphed the bat. At least, as far as we know. I thought for once we'd get a chance to practice the Batmorph. We were planning to go after the Pemlite Crystal the next weekend. Plenty of time to plan and prepare. Yeah, right. So the first time the 5 Animorphs used the Batmorph, morphed the bat, is on the mission into the Matcom building. And that's the first time we get a description of them turning into bats. But, of course, because they're in a pitch black room, they don't see anything. And the same applies in book 17 as well, the Underground, the second time they morph bat. Let's have a look at the descriptions of morphing the bat when they can't actually see anything. I focused my mind on the Batmorph we had acquired. They aren't as creepy as people think. Certainly not as creepy as morphing a spider. This particular bat was very small, just a few inches long. It looked like a mouse, with huge ears and the face of a Pekingese dog. If you forgot about the leathery wings, it was just another basic mammal. But this was one case where the weirdness wasn't something you saw. I couldn't see anything. Nothing. I couldn't see myself shrinking, the ground rushing up at me. I couldn't see the way my legs shrank to almost nothing and brown fur sprouted from my body. I couldn't see the way my fingers grew so long and a paper-thin leather web filled the spaces between them. I saw none of it. I didn't even know I was a bat until my bat brain sent an order for me to open my mouth and chirp out a pulse of sound. I fired a string of super fast sound pulses, like making a loud machine gun sound, only a lot higher and way, way faster. And then, "Whoa!" I said. The entire black, pitch black, invisible room had just lit up. It wasn't like seeing exactly. It was like feeling almost. Except it was like you were feeling from a distance. I felt a vast room. I felt thousands of wires strung taut, up and down, left to right, at angles. I opened my wings. I spread them wide and thought, well, this should be interesting. I tested the wings cautiously. They moved differently than bird wings. More like I was reaching out with each stroke to grab the air and push it behind me. Okay, here goes. I fired an echolocating burst and took off. Fired again. There were tight strings all around me. Left, left again, down, no, up. Right, left, right, straight up. Again and again the high-pitched sound machine gun fired. Again and again I dodged, millimeters from a wire. It was insane. It was so fast my human brain was 3 steps behind. It was instantaneous. It was impossible. The speed, the agility, the instant translation of the echolocating bursts. And suddenly I was through. I was through the wires. I landed on the table in the centre of the room. It was all over in 10 seconds of lunatic flight. It was as if all the world were drawn with pen and ink. Edges and outlines, no hint of colour, and each picture was only a flash, only there as long as the echoes lasted. So a lot of the time when they morph the bat, they're in pitch black, so I don't actually see any of the changes happening. But there is one notable occasion where one of the animals morphed a bat in broad daylight, assuming what you can call on the Lear and Homeworld broad daylight. But in book 18, when the Animorphs are on Lyra, Axe morphs the bat while they're in the middle of this battlefield, and this is how he describes it. My front legs withered and left me almost face down on the rock. My tail blade crinkled like a burning leaf. The crinkling, withering worked its way up my tail. Now my hind legs began to shrink, staying perfectly symmetrical till they were quite small. Then, at the last moment, tiny claws replaced the hooves. My arms moved back, rotating a few degrees around my body. My fingers elongated relative to the rest of my arm, which was shrinking. Skin began to grow in loose, grey then black folds. It hung down from my arms as if I were wearing very loose human clothing. The loose hanging skin tightened and became wings. My ears grew larger. And of course, like almost all Earth creatures, I acquired a mouth. So we know from the initial mission going into the Matcom building roughly what the purpose of the Batmorph is being in a dark place, being able to use this echolocation means you can navigate through really tight spaces, especially in a morph as a giggity pebble. You're in my bad books now anyway. I love you too. Nice personality. So the bat is able, with its small size, to zip through all of the little wires and niggly bits here and there. What else is it useful for? There are a couple of quotes here where we just get another little indication here or there of how this morph can be useful. David was missing and I was on my way. As soon as I could get away safely, I'd be at the usual place. I morphed to brown bat and flew out of my open window. Bats aren't the fastest flies in the world, but it was a moonless night and I didn't want to risk running into power lines or anything that would be invisible. Then the exquisitely sensitive bat ears, the ears that could hear the echoes of hypersonic echolocation, heard something new. A hum, a vast pulsating hum that grew and grew as we flew on. Prince Jake, I believe we are hearing the AniLysis sensors, I said. So it's good for getting around relatively unseen, because when they're on Lyra, they're in the middle of a battlefield, so they want to keep low to the ground, but able to be fast and pretty small. The bat was the perfect morph for that. And also, they've got pretty acute senses, so the sense of hearing, as Axe pointed out there. So a pretty nifty little morph, and a very useful one. So let's look at the Animorphs plot, where the Batmorph came into it, and how well it went. We already know the Matcom plotline, we've discussed that. How did that go? Well, judging from the earlier quotes, it went pretty well at first. They zipped through all these wires in the pitch black and landed on the central pillar where this pemalite crystal was. Then they needed to move it. And this is where the flaw in the plan came in. I have a stupid question, I said. How do we grab this thing? For about 10 seconds, no one said a word. We don't have hands, Cassie said, pointing out the obvious. We can grab it in our mouths, Rachel said, right? Bats eat moths and stuff. They must have pretty strong jaws. Strong enough to get that crystal back to the air vent. Oh, duh, of course, Jake said, sounding relieved. I'll do it. I believe that may not work, Axe said. Jake, Cassie said. Jake, if you have a crystal in your mouth, how do you fire the echolocating burst? At which point we were suddenly no longer feeling so good. I believe our plan now has somewhat of a flaw, Axe said quietly. So the Batmorph was abandoned at that point and they just went a bit gong-ho. So that takes out the Batmorph from that particular equation. The next time we get the Batmorph is in book 17, The Underground. And where it comes in here is... It's an awful book, by the way. just disclaimer before we go into this. So they've dug underground as moles as an attempt to find the Yurt pool to dump oatmeal in it. But instead of falling into the Yurt pool, they fall into this bat cave. Where, they fall into this pitch black bat cave. And then they morph bat, and from that point fly around in there until through the bat cave they find the Yurt pool. Here's the quotes for that. I landed on my back. I landed on something almost soft, something that reeked in my mole nose. It was still in total absolute darkness. I couldn't see anything, but I knew I was in a vast open space. The Yurt pool? No, of course not. There would be light there. But definitely an open space. Large. Quite large. And then I realised I was not alone. I didn't know what they were, but I felt their presence above me. Many, many of them. Rachel! It was Jake now. Answer if you can. I'm okay, I said. I guess I fell into some kind of cave. We flew. Through the cave, which wounded and twisted, always beneath hanging bat stalactites and above a carpet of bat guano stalagmites. I could feel the way out. I could feel the slight changes of air pressure, the changes of temperature that showed the way out. But then... You guys feel that? I asked. It's coming from our left, Axe said. My echolocation is showing an opening, but not an opening to the outside. Oh man, I moaned. I could feel the nearness of the cave opening, but I could also feel this other exit. I had a pretty good sense of where that second exit might lead. So they find the entrance, the Yerk pool through this bat cave, like a little hole in the bat cave. And then, of course, there are hunter robots, these big spherical ball things of metal and violence. And Rachel proceeds to get shot down and, in her Batmorph, falls into the Yerk pool. "Hunter robots," Axe yelled. "We should leave." "Why?" I asked. But at that very moment, I had my answer. 3 narrow Dracon beams fired from the balls. I felt a sharp pain in my right wing. I smelled something burning, and when I looked, I saw a neat, round hole the size of a quarter burned through the leather of my wing. One of the robots began to veer away like it was lost, but the other was just 20 feet away when it fired. I swept my good wing over Tobias, trying to shield him. The Dracon beam burned the wing off. Clear off. I had a stump of a bat arm, and I fell like a stone. Down, down, down through the damp air, down to the Yerk pool. Shenanigans occur in the Yerk pool, which I'd rather not go over, because I didn't like it. But eventually, the shenanigans come to an end, and the Animorphs have to find their way out of the Yerk pool again. And very much in the same way that they got into the Yerk pool, using a mole to dig out initially, they then end up in the Batcave again and escape from there. I emerged into the Batcave. It took another hour for us all to get there. We'd meet up in the absolute darkness, one by one, then in a small, edgy, worried group. Finally we morphed into our bat shapes, exhausted beyond all belief. I could just have lain down there in the eternal darkness and slept for a week. And then, just as we were echolocating around, looking for the exit, the strangest thing happened. The entire cave came alive. In a slow motion rush, all the bats began to drop their grip on the rock roof. They dropped, opened their wings, fired their echolocation sounds, and took off. We exploded from the cave. Maybe 100,000 bats, maybe 1,000,000. Who can count that many bats? I dare say that there aren't as many bats in that cave as there were conveniences in that plot. Anyway, moving on, in the next book, The Decision, book 18, we have the Batmorph again. This is where we saw Axe morph the bat earlier, but why did they morph that bat? Here is clarification on why it was used in that particular scenario. "The ground is too rough to walk over," Cassie said thoughtfully, "and it's getting dark. We could try smaller birds. The seagull morphs again. No, wait, bats. Not as fast, but very agile. And with echolocation, we can fly close to the ground, even in the dark." "To the Batmorph, Robin," Marco said, with cheerfulness that seemed totally out of place. "We morph, then we fly, hugging the ground the whole way," Jake said. "Once behind Andalite lines, we try and figure out a way to reach this Prince Galluit." So that was where, in book 18, they used the Batmorph on the Lyran home world, after being transported there through a zero space issue. It was next used in... well, the same book actually. It was used again in book 18. But this time the context was a bit different. So they've talked to the Andalites, Prince Galluit and all that lot. And the Animorphs' plan is to blow up the only Lyran continent. How are they going to do that? Well, the Andalites have placed a series of bombs beneath this continent. Would you stop making noises over there, cats? Honest to God. That's you, Lila.
Don't be mean to Lila.
Can I be mean to Mercia?
No.
Oh. Can I be mean to
No.
this guitar plectrum?
Yeah, alright. It's sensitive, you know.
Tough.
You may cry.
You best have learnt your lesson. See, this is why I'm the boss. So I dish out the discipline.
Makes you think you're the boss.
Oh yeah, good point. So, in order to get to this place where they place the bombs underneath the continent, they've got to fly through a series of caves that are pitch black, because of course they are. But there's also vine snake-like protrusions coming from the walls that will strike out at you. And that seems like the perfect scenario for a bat, and it turns out it was. I emerged as Andalite, standing in a cold, absolutely black cave, with water still sloshing over my hooves. "Bat," Prince Jake said. His mouth sounds echoed slightly. We tucked a wing. We flapped up on leather wings and raced at full, tearing speed. "We have to remember the snakes," I said. We flapped as if our lives depended on it, through jutting rocks and stalactites, around sudden turns, up sudden chimneys and down sudden wells. All of it reduced to colourless lines in our mind's eye, a sketch drawn with blasts of sound. Around one hairpin turn, and suddenly, a blast of sounds, a cacophony of echolocating squeaks and trills. "The snakes!" I cried. Our own echolocation showed them as writhing lines that hung from the low ceiling and reached out from the walls. What do we do? As Rachel would say if she were here, we go for it. It was a nightmare. Deadly snakes filled the air. Lost and confused, we powered on, flapping wings that became more and more shredded as more and more of the snakes found their target. And then, swoosh, I blew free of the snakes. The cave walls backed off, the ceiling was gone, and light, blessed light, was glowing all around me. We don't see much of the Batmorph from then on, but there are a couple of occasions where it does come into play. The next notable usage was in another unfortunate Rachel book, book 42, The Journey. So they're inside Marco, in his mouth, and they get swallowed with the Helmicrons. And then there's a whole... I think Rachel's in Elephant Morph. She falls into Marco's stomach acid. The other animals are nowhere to be seen, and these Helmicrons are firing off from somewhere. And while Rachel is finding out, "Oh shit, I seem to be dissolving now," it turns out the other animals have morphed bat, and then proceed to demorph very quickly once the Helmicrons shoot them down with their laser guns and they fall into the same stomach acid. Here's a little quote from that. But basically, this quote here is the entirety of that bat morph sequence, basically. I couldn't see my friends by the time they arrived. The acid had splashed into my eyes, eaten away at the vulnerable eyeball, painfully blinding me. But I heard a clumsy flap, flap way overhead. Wings, bat wings, the perfect morph for seeing in the dark. That's when the animals say, "Hey, we're here now." The Helmicrons shoot them down and they fall into the thing and demorph and remorph something else, or something along those lines. But the next book shows another usage of the Batmorph, but this time it's only Tobias. They're in the gas pipeline, the whole Taylor plot. We've covered the gas pipeline before, but they're going to flood the yurt pool with this hazardous gas and turn it and explode, make it go boom, basically. But Axe and Tobias have acquired a taxonomorph, so they can go digging through this tunnel to make that necessary join from the gas pipeline to the yurt pool. And Axe has gone far along digging, eating away at all this dirt. And the animals are trying to get a hold of him. "Yoo-hoo, Aximili, yoo-hoo!" But he doesn't reply. He's given them the cold shoulder. Is that the right way of putting it? Cold shoulder? That's the right turn of phrase,
Giving
isn't it?
someone the cold shoulder?
Well, that means just ignoring them, doesn't
Kind of
it?
ignoring them, yeah.
Yeah, so I used that right. I got it right. Yeah, he's given to the whole, "Oh, fuck you guys." So Tobias and the other animals think, "Oh, we need to find out what's going on with Axe. He's been away a long while now. Times are ticking." So the other animals block off Taylor's view. Tobias moves ahead as Andalite demorphs and then morphs bat, so he can see in the dark. He can echolocate and see this tunnel and what's going on with it, and searches for Axe that way. I took a few steps into the tunnel. "Axe, can you hear me? You have to stop. You'll die of exhaustion." There was no reply. Thought speaker otherwise. He must be fixated. We have to stop him. I took off the watch, checked the glow-in-the-dark numbers, put it around Jake's right front leg. "Cover me." I trotted several feet into the tunnel. When I saw through swiveled stalk eyes that Jake and Marco had planted themselves in front of the entrance and masked me from Taylor's view, I demorphed. Then I began to morph again. I flew a long way, maybe a quarter mile, until I came to something strange. The tunnel became something else, something expanded, a hollowed-out space. A large cavern-like room, like maybe Axe had gone nuts and circled up and down 10 or 12 times. I could hear Axe now, closer. The high-pitched screeching of taxon teeth on dirt and small rocks was almost deafening to bat senses. The tunnel continued on the far side of the chamber. I flapped my wings and flew in. Axe, is that you? My chirps weren't returning. They were being absorbed by something soft, something whap. I flew into Axe's backside and slapped to the tunnel floor. There's just a little problem with the Batmorph. The echolocating bursts, they rebound off surfaces, so if you've got a really absorbent surface, like a taxon, it didn't. So he slapped into Axe, but he'd found him by that point and proceeded to demorph, and that was the end of that usage of the Batmorph. And then the last notable time we get the Batmorph is in the penultimate book, book 53, The Answer. And again, it's a very short usage. So the Yeerk pool has been blown up at this point, and the Yeerks have tasked a large group of Taxons to start building new ones. So this big army of Taxons are just digging up this ground, and the Animorphs want to stop them. In order to get to this area, they morph bats so they can get in largely undetected. These are the quotes. And the first quote is basically saying what they're doing. And then we get the quote with the Batmorph. So we had to make sure the new Yeerk pool wasn't ready. We Animorphs went in first, the 6 of us, in Batmorph. Tobias had reported the real bats were in the area during the evening hours, which would allow us to blend in naturally. So that is the Batmorph. Did you learn a lot today, my dear?
Sure.
She says sure. Very enthusiastically, I might add.
I learned
This
a lot.
this little creature, you like these bats, don't you? Yeah, she likes them. I think they were very useful. They were very niche, a very niche use. They can only use them in certain scenarios, but when they can use them, when they are useful, they're very useful. Even that in that last example there, just as a way to get into an area undetected, into very small places. I think it's a really good addition to the series, the Batmorph. There are certainly a lot worse morphs that they used. This was one of those that was added to the Animorphs arsenal, which was very, very good. And I liked its usage, even though it was used in some pretty atrocious books. But then it was used in some very good books as well. Yeah, I think it's a quintessential Animorphs morph. You know, it's got a unique ability that they can utilise when necessary. I think it's one of my favourite bits about Animorphs. Just how they use all these different animals depending on what the plot is doing at the time. I think it's great. Thank you, Bat, for being a jolly good morph and for being such a cute little Dickens.
When do you think they'd use Fluffer?
When do you think they'd use Fluffer?
Yeah.
Book 2. When Rachel
That
used
Fluffer,
Fluffer.
though.
This Fluff. That is Fluffer. That's the actual Fluffer.
Cringe.
Fluffer. Come here. Come on. Yeah, there you are. You were used in book 2. You belong to the Chapmans. Well, you used to anyway. Good kitty. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. This has been another AniLysis, and the next one is on William Roger Tennant. That lovely chap. So thank you, Bat. Thank you, Pebble. Thank you, Fluffer. And thank you all for watching. I shall see you next time. Ta-ra.